My name is Rachel Bennett, and I never imagined walking down the aisle with 2 empty chairs where my parents should have been. They said marrying a plumber was beneath our family name, that I was an embarrassment. But what they didn't know was who Thomas Kane really was. One photo from our wedding changed everything. Suddenly, their silence turned to desperate phone calls. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when the people who raised you only love a version of you that never existed. Stay with me. The twist you're about to hear, no one ever saw coming. I grew up in a world polished to perfection, every room pristine, every dinner party choreographed, every photo album curated for status. Our family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a sprawling Georgian mansion that had graced the pages of architectural magazines. My parents, Robert and Evelyn Bennett, weren't just wealthy, they were social royalty. My father's construction empire built half the luxury properties in Fairfield County, and my mother chaired every gala, luncheon, and fundraiser worth mentioning. In public, we were the picture of refinement. But behind the French doors and imported marble, I learned a painful truth early on. I was invisible in my own home. From the moment my younger sister Amanda could walk, she was the centre of gravity. With her golden curls and angelic smile, she charmed everyone, especially our parents. Amanda danced through childhood like she was born for the spotlight. By age 6, she was modelling in local magazines. By 12, she had a private stylist. Meanwhile, I hid in corners with books and puzzles, drawn to things I could understand and control. I wasn't shy, I was observant, but to my parents, I was quiet, which somehow translated into disappointing. At school, I thrived. Straight A's, advanced placement classes, math competitions, debate club. I was always at the top. I didn't crave applause, just acknowledgement. One day in 8th grade, I came home clutching a state science fair trophy, heart pounding with pride. My father glanced at it from behind his Wall Street Journal. "Good job," he muttered, without looking up. Amanda walked in moments later with a new outfit she'd styled herself, and my mother practically burst into applause. "She's got such an eye for fashion," she gushed. "You're going to be someone, sweetheart." That comment stuck with me like a thorn. You're going to be someone. As if academic excellence made me no one. That was the unspoken rule in our household. Your value was tied to appearances, to charm, to who you were seen with. Substance, integrity, passion, those were hobbies, not assets. I tried to mold myself to fit their expectations. For one summer, I stopped reading and tried to dress like Amanda. I copied her outfits, forced myself into social events, faked laughter at garden parties filled with people who barely noticed I was there. But I couldn't fake my way into their love. I wasn't designed for performance. I was designed for meaning. The final straw came during college application season. I applied to Ivy League schools with a resume that practically screamed dedication. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, I got into all 3. I chose Columbia on a full academic scholarship. At dinner, I announced the news, thinking for once I'd made them proud. My father raised an eyebrow. "Well, that'll save us some money." My mother nodded without looking up from her phone. Amanda had just been accepted into a prestigious fashion academy in Paris. All conversation pivoted to her, again. That night I sat in my room, the acceptance letter still in my hand, feeling like I'd brought home a prize no one wanted. I realised something painful and liberating. I could win every award in the world, and it wouldn't be enough. Not for them. I wasn't shiny enough. I wasn't Amanda. So I stopped trying. I went to Columbia. I earned dual degrees in finance and behavioural economics. I built a life on merit, not appearances. And while my parents hosted lavish galas, I learned how to invest, how to negotiate, how to read the intentions behind polished smiles. My world was smaller, but it was real. And yet, no matter how far I climbed, that small girl inside me, the one holding a trophy no one clapped for, still waited for someone to say, "We see you." The fractures in my family weren't always loud. They came in quiet absences, in moments where I should have mattered but didn't. My 17th birthday was one of them. I didn't expect a big celebration. I never had. But I assumed there would be something, maybe dinner, a cake, a card. Instead, my parents were in the Hamptons for a benefit gala, and Amanda was attending a fashion internship orientation in Milan. I spent the evening alone, reheating leftovers and pretending I didn't care. When I texted my mother a simple "it's my birthday," she responded 5 hours later with a thumbs up emoji and a photo of Amanda in a designer showroom. The worst part wasn't being forgotten, it was realizing that I expected it. By the time I graduated from Columbia, I'd stopped hoping. I knew my parents wouldn't attend, but I still left 2 front row seats empty. The sun was high that morning as I crossed the stage to accept my diploma. I scanned the crowd once, half-heartedly, before looking away. My classmates had balloons, cheers, proud families waving from the stands. I had silence. After the ceremony, I took a picture holding my diploma, alone, and posted it with a caption that read, "For the girl who had to clap for herself." It got 3 likes. One of them was from Amanda. Amanda, who had built a personal brand off curated authenticity. Amanda, who had once begged me for help on a high school project. A design proposal for a sustainable fashion line. I'd given her a few notes, a theme idea based on circular systems and closed-loop production, inspired by one of my economics courses. She'd scribbled it into her sketchbook without much thought. A month later, she won first place in a regional competition. The local paper dubbed her a visionary in eco-conscious fashion. At dinner, my mother toasted her brilliance. I sat there, invisible, watching Amanda bask in the applause built on my blueprint. I never told anyone, not because I was noble, but because it confirmed what I already knew. My thoughts only mattered when they could be worn, sold, or celebrated by someone else. So I pulled away. I stopped joining holiday dinners, stopped replying to texts that were always one sentence too short, too late, or too transactional. I rented a tiny apartment in Brooklyn and started over. It had peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was mine. Every book on the shelf, every mug in the cupboard was chosen, not inherited. There, I built something I never had growing up. Identity without performance. My parents noticed vaguely. My mother would call once a month and ask if I was still doing that finance thing. My father once sent me a Christmas card with a typed note, "Keep working hard, it builds character." Amanda stayed in the spotlight. Her Instagram follower count exploded. She got flown to Paris for Fashion Week. She dated a hedge fund manager, then a tech founder. My mother bragged at country clubs. My father referred to her as our little legacy. Me? I became the footnote, but footnotes carry the truth. And one day someone would read all of it. It started with a flood, not the metaphorical kind, I'd had those plenty, but a real one. A pipe burst under my bathroom sink on a Tuesday morning in March, the kind of emergency that doesn't check your schedule or mood. I was running late for a client call when I stepped onto a soggy bath mat and heard the unmistakable hiss of water under pressure. Within minutes, the leak turned into a steady stream, soaking the tile, then the hallway carpet. I panicked. I had no idea how to shut off the water and no one to call, not family, not friends who knew plumbing. I did what any rational adult would do. I Googled Wilson Home Services, local, 24/7 emergency response. I called and barely managed to explain the situation over the sound of rushing water. The dispatcher promised someone within the hour. I rolled up towels, tried to dam the flow, and told myself this wasn't a metaphor for my life unravelling. Not again. 50 minutes later, a knock on the door. I opened it to find a man with muddy work boots, rolled-up sleeves, and a face that didn't belong to plumbing ads. He had soft brown eyes, a crooked but kind smile, and hands that looked like they knew effort. He carried a red toolbox and wore a navy blue polo embroidered with his name, Thomas. "Pipe trouble?" he asked, already stepping inside, scanning the floor with a practiced eye. "Understatement of the year," I muttered, stepping back. Thomas knelt beside the sink with fluid efficiency, twisting valves, unscrewing panels, calming the chaos. I watched him work, how precise his movements were, how he didn't waste a single motion. Within 15 minutes the water was off. Within an hour the damaged section was replaced and the cleanup had begun. I expected small talk, maybe awkward silence. What I got was something else. "So," he said while mopping up the last puddle, "your copy of The Second Sex, you reading it for work or for life?" I blinked. "Excuse me." He nodded toward the bookshelf near the hallway. "De Beauvoir, it's not light reading, and you've got The Republic, Thinking Fast and Slow, and Capital in the 21st Century. Your bathroom may be a mess, but your mind isn't." I stared. Most people didn't notice my books, let alone know what they meant. "For life," I replied slowly, "and work, behavioural economics." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That explains the Kahneman. I'm more into systems design, but behaviour loops are fascinating, especially when it comes to resource consumption." I tilted my head. "Are you a plumber who reads Daniel Kahneman?" He smirked. "Among other things." We talked for 20 minutes after the job was done, about decision fatigue, social signalling, and the philosophical roots of scarcity. I was stunned. Not because I thought plumbers couldn't be intellectuals, that would have been classist and narrow, but because he was the first person in a long time who didn't ask me what I did, so they could judge me, but instead asked what I thought and actually listened. As he packed up, he handed me a business card. "Call if it leaks again," he said, then paused, "or if you want to continue the discussion. I don't charge for conversation." And then he was gone. For the rest of the day I couldn't concentrate. I kept thinking about the way his eyes had crinkled when I made a joke about Plato and credit scores. The way he didn't flinch at intellectual depth, but engaged with it. He didn't just see the leak, he saw me. 3 days later, I emailed him. "What are your thoughts on sunk cost fallacy in relationships?" He replied in under 10 minutes. "Deeply flawed, but wildly common. Coffee?" Our first coffee date stretched into 4 hours. We sat in the corner of a quiet cafe in Park Slope, sharing stories, theories, and eventually laughter that made the barista give us that knowing look. Thomas listened the way people rarely do, fully present, eyes fixed not just on my face, but on the space between my words. He was refreshingly honest, humble without false modesty, curious without agenda. We fell into a rhythm, bookstore strolls, late-night phone calls about everything from infrastructure policy to the ethics of automation. He made me lasagna from scratch. I introduced him to vintage jazz. He didn't flinch when I cried, watching It's a Wonderful Life, and I didn't flinch when he told me he hadn't been to a movie theatre in 10 years because he was always fixing other people's emergencies. About a month in, while we were walking through Prospect Park, he told me about his father. He passed 5 years ago. Heart attack. We didn't see it coming. I squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry." He nodded. He owned Wilson Home Services, built it from nothing, worked himself into the ground, literally. When he died, I was a year into my electrical engineering degree at Stanford. I stopped mid-step. "Wait, you went to Stanford?" He chuckled. "Surprised?" "I mean, yes. Not because of your job, just people don't usually drop Stanford in casual conversation." He shrugged. "That's the thing. When my dad died, there was no one else. Mom was barely coping. The business had bills, clients, equipment leases. So I took a leave of absence, thinking it'd be temporary. 1 year turned into 2. Then I realized I liked it. The work, the tangible impact, the fact that at the end of the day, something was fixed, something mattered. I was silent for a moment, absorbing that. So, you didn't drop out because you couldn't handle it? No, he said. I dropped out because I could handle something harder. Grief, responsibility, reality. That was the first twist. The man my parents would label a tradesman had once been on track to become one of Silicon Valley's elite. And he walked away, not for failure, but for family. I fell a little in love with him that day. Eventually, the inevitable came. I had to introduce him to mine. I tried to delay it, made excuses, but he sensed my hesitation. "You're ashamed of me?" he asked gently one night after dinner. "No," I said immediately. "I'm ashamed of them, and I don't want them to hurt you." He smiled softly. "I can take it, but I don't want to be your secret." So I invited him to a Sunday brunch at my parents' estate in Greenwich. Amanda would be there too. I prepped him with every possible scenario: what to wear, what not to say, which rooms to avoid. He showed up in a clean navy sport coat, crisp white shirt, and the same honest expression he always wore. My mother greeted us at the door with a practiced smile. My father raised an eyebrow the moment Thomas extended his hand. "You're the plumber," he said flatly. "Thomas Kane," Thomas said, still offering his hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." My father shook it briefly, then wiped his hand on his blazer. "Do you clean your nails before shaking hands, or—" Thomas didn't react. "After work, always," he replied calmly. Amanda walked in with a champagne flute and gave me a once-over. "Bold move, sis," she said under her breath. Brunch was excruciating. My father steered every conversation toward finance and politics. My mother corrected Thomas's grammar once. Amanda asked him if he'd ever fixed a celebrity's toilet. Thomas remained gracious, composed, never defensive. I, on the other hand, wanted to scream. After they left the table, I apologized. He took my hand. "Rachel, I don't need their approval. I only need to know. Do you?" I looked into his eyes and said without hesitation, "Yes, I do." We got engaged on a rainy Thursday evening in our kitchen, barefoot, surrounded by the smell of garlic and rosemary. No flash mobs, no champagne towers. Just Thomas holding a small velvet box with a ring he'd designed himself, a sapphire center stone encircled by tiny diamonds set in recycled white gold. "Rachel," he said, voice steady, "I don't want a life full of noise. I want one full of meaning, with you." I said yes through tears, with flour still on my cheek. I waited a few days to tell my parents, unsure how to approach it. I even considered just sending a wedding invite, skipping the conversation altogether. But I told myself they deserved a chance to respond like real parents. Maybe, just maybe, the news would thaw whatever Cold War we were in. So I called. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and rushed. "Rachel, I'm in the middle of a board meeting. Can this wait?" "It'll only take a minute," I said. "I wanted you to hear it from me," Thomas proposed. There was a pause. I could almost hear her blink. "And you said yes?" "I did." Another pause. Then a low exhale. "Well," she said flatly, "you've always made unconventional choices." I bit the inside of my cheek. "We're getting married in August. We'd like you and Dad to be there." She didn't respond. The silence filled the space like static. Finally, she said, "Your father has a charity gala that weekend. It's been on the calendar for months. The ceremony is at 4. The gala starts at 7. I'll check with him." Click. I didn't cry right away. I made dinner. I watched a documentary. I folded laundry. It wasn't until I saw the RSVP card on our coffee table, blank, still waiting, that I broke. Thomas found me on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, holding that card like it was a verdict. "They're not coming," I whispered. He sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. "Then they're the ones missing something, not you." But part of me still hoped. Every morning I checked my email. Every day I listened for a phone call, and every time the mail arrived, my stomach knotted. Nothing came, no message, no card, not even a lie to soften the blow. 3 weeks later, Amanda posted photos from her engagement party, a black tie event at the plaza, complete with custom cocktails named after her and her fiancé, live music, and flower arrangements the size of small trees. My mother was front and centre in every shot, smiling like she'd been crowned. My father gave a toast that went viral in their social circles. "To Amanda, our pride and joy, may her future be as bright as the spotlight she was born to shine in." I closed Instagram. My hands were shaking. Later that night, Amanda called, not to congratulate me, but to ask for our grandmother's antique earrings to wear at her bridal shower. When I told her I was keeping them for my own wedding, she laughed. "Right, that thing, still happening?" "Yes, Amanda, it's still happening." "Well," she said with syrupy disdain, "at least your plumber showed up." I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I sat with Thomas on the fire escape of our apartment. The city buzzed below, indifferent to my ache. He handed me a cup of chamomile tea, then said quietly, "You can still back out." I turned to him, startled. "What?" "This wedding, all of it. If it's hurting you too much, we can postpone, or elope, or whatever you need." I shook my head. "Thomas, I want to marry you. That's the only part I'm sure of. I just wish they could be happy for me." "They're not capable of that," he said gently, "because you didn't follow their script, and because I don't fit their definition of worthy. That's not your failure, that's theirs." He was right. I knew he was right. But logic doesn't always soothe the wounds we got when we were still small enough to think love had to be earned. A few days later, our wedding planner asked for final guest confirmations. I left my parents' names on the list. Hope is stubborn like that. August 12th dawned bright and still, the sky stretching cloudless over the riverside gardens where we would say our vows. The sun streamed through tall oaks, casting golden light across the stone path I would soon walk down, alone. The venue was quiet when I arrived, a hush of anticipation and nerves. The florist had just finished placing mason jars of wildflowers along the aisle, each one carefully chosen, forget-me-nots, lavender, white ranunculus. I'd picked them myself, sturdy blooms, nothing too flashy, the kind that don't wilt easily. Inside the bridal suite, my best friend Lisa zipped up my dress with gentle fingers. "You look like you belong in a fairy tale," she whispered. I tried to smile, but the mirror didn't lie. My eyes were red, puffy, not from lack of sleep, but from what I now understood was grief. Not for losing my parents, but for finally letting go of the fantasy that they would change. "I'm sorry," I said, sitting down at the vanity. "This isn't how it was supposed to be." Lisa knelt beside me, her tone fierce. "They had a choice, and they made the wrong one. But you, Rach, you made the right one. You chose someone who sees you, who loves you." I nodded, the words sinking deeper than I expected. As she touched up my makeup, I stared at the empty chair in the corner of the room, the one I had envisioned my mother in, beaming with pride, maybe even fussing over my hair. But it remained just that, empty. Like the front row of our ceremony, where 2 reserved seats bore their names in gold calligraphy. At 3:40 p.m, the wedding coordinator peeked in. 10 minutes? My stomach clenched. Who's walking me down the aisle? I hadn't asked anyone. I'd prepared myself to do it alone, shoulders squared against the symbolism of it all. Before she could respond, there was a knock. Lisa opened the door. And there he was. "Uncle Henry?" I gasped. My father's older brother stepped into the room wearing a grey suit that didn't quite match but was pressed perfectly. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his eyes, soft, kind, always a little too observant for my parents' taste, shone with something I hadn't seen in a long time: affection. "I heard your father declined," he said gently, "and I figured someone ought to walk you down the aisle, if you'll have me." For a moment I couldn't breathe. As a child, I'd spent hours in Uncle Henry's attic studio, watching him paint and listening to old vinyl records. He was the black sheep of the family, an artist, unmarried, without a business card or a club membership. My parents used to call him eccentric, their polite way of saying useless. But he'd been the only adult in my life who never asked me to be anything but myself. "You came," I whispered, tears rising again. He smiled. "You're the only one who ever saw me, Rachel. It's only right I return the favour." I threw my arms around him, sobbing into the lapel of his mismatched suit. Lisa wiped a tear from her cheek behind me. When the music began, I took Henry's arm and walked toward the garden, each step lighter than the last. As we turned the corner and stepped into view, I saw Thomas waiting at the altar, eyes locked on mine, smiling like he'd just spotted his future. Our guests rose. My breath caught. The sun was warm on my shoulders. The breeze lifted my veil. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. During the ceremony, I caught Uncle Henry dabbing at his eyes more than once. When I kissed Thomas, the crowd erupted, not politely, not performatively, but with joy that vibrated in my chest. At the reception, friends clinked glasses and told stories. There were no society photographers, no media coverage, no board members or investors, just real people sharing real laughter and one long table where love replaced legacy. Later that evening, I danced barefoot under the stars with Thomas, our song playing softly in the background. And when the moment came, the one I had dreaded most, I didn't feel sad. I felt whole. Because the people who mattered had shown up, and that, I realised, was more than enough. The day after the wedding, I woke up to birdsong and the scent of pine drifting through the open cabin window. Thomas had rented a quiet lakeside retreat in Vermont for our honeymoon. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just trees, water, and silence. It was bliss. But on the third day, we drove into town for groceries and cell reception, lit up like fireworks. My phone buzzed with messages, some congratulatory, some confused, and one that simply said, "What is Hydronic Systems, and why is Thomas the CEO?" I stared at the screen, pulse quickening. It came with a photo, one I hadn't seen yet, taken by a guest at our wedding and posted on LinkedIn. In the image, Thomas was standing among 3 sharply dressed men I didn't recognise, all laughing mid-conversation. Behind them was a banner I barely remembered being strung behind the reception table. It read, "Congratulations, Thomas Kane, CEO, Hydronic Systems." "What is this?" I asked aloud. Thomas glanced over from the driver's seat, calm. "Oh, that, I repeated. "As in, you being the CEO of something I've never even heard of." He pulled into a parking lot and turned off the engine. "I was going to tell you after the honeymoon," he said, "but I guess LinkedIn beat me to it." I blinked. "Thomas, what is Hydronic?" He leaned back in his seat, sighed, then reached for my hand. "Okay, full truth." And then came the second twist in our story, one even I hadn't seen coming. Hydronic Systems, it turned out, was a clean water technology company Thomas had been quietly building for the past 3 years. It specialised in decentralised water conservation systems for urban and residential infrastructures. The prototypes had already reduced water usage in pilot buildings by over 60%, using adaptive AI and real-time flow diagnostics. He'd filed patents, formed partnerships, quietly accepted a round of seed funding. The day after our wedding, one of those partners posted the photo with the caption, Congratulations to our new official CEO, Thomas Kane, visionary engineer, relentless innovator. I sat in stunned silence. Visionary engineer? Thomas nodded slowly. I didn't just go to Stanford, Rachel. I was working in military-grade fluid dynamics at Forsyth Defense Tech. I led their R&D division until I walked away. I tried to process this. You led R&D at a weapons company? Water purification systems for field deployment, but yes, they were moving toward weapons-integrated tech, and I wasn't comfortable with it, so I left. My heart thudded. And then you became a plumber. I went back to my roots, my dad's business. I thought it would be temporary, but it gave me clarity, perspective, time to build something that mattered. I looked out the windshield, the grocery store in front of us blurred by the fog on the glass. Why didn't you tell me? His voice softened. Because you didn't fall for the MIT engineer or the CEO. You fell for the guy who fixed your sink and debated behavioral economics over takeout Thai. And I needed that. I needed to be loved without the titles. It was hard to argue with that. And yet, part of me felt disoriented, like the ground beneath my feet had shifted without warning. But my parents, I began. Still don't know, he finished. And that's okay. Let them judge the version of me they think I am. That night, I lay awake thinking about secrets, not the kind meant to deceive, but the ones kept for protection. Thomas had protected his truth so he could build a life of substance, not status. And somehow, despite everything, I respected him more for it. But I also knew something else now. My parents were about to find out, and the narrative they'd built, the one where I was the disappointment, was about to crack wide open. That evening, back at the cabin, I sat on the porch wrapped in a wool blanket, staring out at the lake. The reflection of the moon shimmered gently on the surface, broken occasionally by a ripple, a breeze, a memory I couldn't quite hold still. Inside, Thomas was preparing tea, calm as ever. How could someone carry such a weight and still move like water? He stepped out, handed me a mug, and sat beside me. For a while we didn't speak. Then he said, "There's something else." I turned to him slowly. "More?" He nodded. Hydronic's next phase isn't just residential systems. We're working on a scalable network, a decentralized smart water grid. I blinked. A grid? Think of it like the internet, but for water. Each node, every house, building, farm, collects, purifies, and shares excess with the system. It adjusts based on usage, weather, population. It's adaptive, resilient, and completely off-centralized infrastructure. No single point of failure. I stared at him, mug cooling in my hands. That sounds massive. He nodded again. It is. We've partnered with a handful of test cities. Early results are promising, and the Pentagon is watching. The Pentagon, I repeated, as in the actual US Department of Defense. They're interested in its application for military bases and disaster relief zones. Self-sustaining water systems reduce vulnerability during crises. A chill slid down my spine, not from fear, but awe. This man, who fixed my bathroom pipe and quoted Plato over dinner, was building a technology that could change the way the world drinks. And he hadn't told me. Not out of secrecy, but out of something stranger. Humility. I looked at him then, really looked. "You know," I said quietly, "if you'd led with this, the Pentagon, the patents, the CEO title, I probably would have been impressed, intimidated even." "I know," he said. "That's why I didn't." I studied his face. "So why me? Out of everyone you could have dated, why the woman with trust issues and an estranged family and a job that bores people at cocktail parties?" He smiled, soft and slow. "Because you never asked me what I did. You asked me how I felt." That stopped me cold. I'd never considered it. But he was right. On that first day, soaked floor and all, I hadn't asked about his resume. I'd asked, Are you okay? And later, what are you reading? My interest wasn't in his credentials. It was in his presence. You made me feel human again, he continued. Not a symbol, not a brand, just a guy with wet boots and a head full of ideas. My throat tightened. I didn't fall in love with the consultant, he added. I fell in love with the woman who talks to books like they're old friends, who burns toast and laughs about it, who shows up every day even when no one claps. I blinked fast, trying to stop the tears. And I knew, he said, that if we ever built a life together, it would be real, grounded, something that could weather storms. I reached for his hand. Thank you, I whispered. He kissed my knuckles. Thank you for seeing me. We sat like that for a long time, two people wrapped in more than just blankets, tethered by choice. But later, as I scrolled through missed notifications, the illusion of distance broke. My mother had called, twice, no message, just missed calls. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. They knew, and they were coming. They showed up at our apartment the following Monday at exactly 7 p.m. sharp. My mother wore cream-coloured silk and pearls. My father was in a navy suit that still had the dry cleaner's tag inside the collar. They carried gifts, an expensive bottle of champagne and a glossy white bag from a designer store I couldn't afford, even on my best bonus months. Thomas and I had spent the day prepping, not the house, but ourselves, emotional armour. We knew this wasn't a social call. They hadn't missed my wedding out of poor scheduling. They had chosen absence. And now, after a LinkedIn post and some whispering behind closed boardroom doors, they were suddenly present. Rachel, darling, my mother said with a rehearsed smile, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I flinched without meaning to. She smelled like Chanel and anticipation. Come in, I said flatly. My father extended the champagne. Belated congratulations, we were travelling. Things got away from us. Did the gala end up in Paris? I asked, folding my arms. He cleared his throat. We moved into the living room. Thomas remained calm, poised, offering them water instead of wine. They accepted, of course. They were still pretending we were here for polite conversation. So, my father said after some pleasantries about the weather and the flowers on our balcony, we've been reading about hydronic. Impressive work, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas replied, offering nothing more. My mother leaned in slightly. We're actually developing a new residential project in upstate New York, eco-friendly, high-end living. Water sustainability is one of the big checkboxes for investors. We think your systems could be a perfect match. There it was, the real reason, not regret, not family, business. My fingers curled into fists on my lap. My father continued, the Bennett Legacy residences could benefit immensely from an exclusive contract with hydronic systems. We'd be happy to discuss investment terms. I looked at them, stunned. They hadn't even asked about the honeymoon. They hadn't asked about the ceremony, about how I'd felt walking alone, or almost alone, down the aisle. They didn't ask how we were adjusting to married life. They just went straight to contracts and ROI. You're not here for me, I said finally, my voice trembling more from rage than sadness. You're here for the product you dismissed with him. My mother blinked. Rachel, don't be dramatic. Of course we're here for you. No, you're not, I said. You're here because the man you mocked for having dirt under his nails turned out to be more valuable than your portfolio. And now suddenly he's worth your time. They exchanged glances. My father's jaw tightened. My mother smoothed the hem of her blouse. We misjudged, yes, but we're trying to fix that. Fix what? I demanded. The wedding you missed, the years of silence, the way you taught me to measure love by usefulness. Thomas placed his hand on mine, grounding me. My father tried again. Rachel, business and family often intersect. This could benefit both sides. That's the problem, I snapped. You think love is transactional, that everything is a negotiation, even your children. Now wait just a minute, my mother started. No, I cut in. You wait. For once, you listen. I don't want your contract. I don't want your money. And I definitely don't want your pity dressed up as partnership. They sat in stunned silence. Thomas finally spoke. With respect, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, we're focused on partnerships rooted in shared values, not shared bloodlines. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. My father stood slowly. We'll be in touch. As they reached the door, my mother turned. We just want to be part of your life, Rachel. You had the chance, I said quietly. You declined. The next morning, I awoke to silence and clarity. Thomas brewed coffee in the kitchen, humming something soft and familiar. The tension from the night before hadn't lingered in him the way it did in me. That was one of the things I loved about him. His calm wasn't performative. It came from knowing who he was. No need to win over anyone's approval. As I watched him pour coffee, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. I was done hoping my parents would become someone they weren't. That alone felt like peace. Later that afternoon, Thomas received the follow-up email we both expected. My father had forwarded a formal proposal from Bennett Property Group, exclusive implementation of hydronics residential tech, a multi-million-dollar deal with generous margins. He ended the message with, "Let's keep this in the family." Thomas read it, set his phone down, and said simply, "No." "You're sure?" I asked. "Absolutely." And he meant it. I built Hydronic to give people freedom. Freedom from fragile systems, from gatekeepers, from exactly this. I smiled, full of pride. Then we moved forward. We did. But the universe, in its poetic timing, wasn't done shifting the power dynamics in our lives. Just 2 days later, I received a phone call from Amanda. I almost didn't answer, but something in me hesitated. Her voice came through frantic, brittle. "Rachel, what's wrong?" "It's Bradley. He's under investigation. The FBI showed up at our condo this morning, took his laptop, his phone. They think he was funneling investor money into a shell company in Dubai." I froze. "Are you serious?" She choked out a sob. "He's been running some sort of offshore scheme. There's press outside our building. My name's on everything. I don't even know what's mine anymore." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. This was Amanda, the golden girl, the family favourite, the face in every spotlight. And now she sounded like a child, lost in a world she couldn't control. "I need somewhere to go," she whispered. Can I stay with you?" I could hear my mother's voice echoing in my memory. Amanda was born for brilliance. You, Rachel, are the practical one. It used to sting. But now the sting was gone, replaced by something colder, clearer. "I'll talk to Thomas," I said. Of course he said yes. Amanda arrived that night with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes. No makeup, no filters, just raw panic. Over dinner, she barely touched her food. "They cut me off," she murmured. "Mum and Dad said I need to lay low, that their attorneys are dealing with their exposure in the partnership deals with Bradley's company." "Exposure?" I asked. "Turns out they co-signed on some of his property purchases. They're liable for a lot more than image now." I leaned back, the irony of it all washing over me like rain. The daughter they exalted had dragged them into scandal. The daughter they dismissed was now their last stable branch. "You don't have to say anything," Amanda added quietly. "I know how I treated you." I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in years, and I saw a person, not a rival. "You can stay as long as you need," I said, "but I'm not your backup plan." She nodded, ashamed. "I know. I'm not proud of who I've been." "I'm not your shadow, Amanda. I'm not your fallback." She looked up, eyes glistening. "I know. You never were." The next day my parents called again. Their tone had shifted. "We need to talk," my father said, about Amanda, about you, about all of it. But when they arrived, I didn't wait for them to lead. I'm not your silent daughter anymore, I told them, before they could speak. You only come to me when something falls apart. But I'm not your fixer. I'm not your safety net. And I'm certainly not your second choice. They stood there, stunned. You taught me to chase approval like it was currency, I said. But I've built something better. With someone better. And I don't owe you anything. And this time, I didn't cry. Amanda's fall from grace was as fast as it was brutal. One day she was the centerpiece of our family's pride. Engagement ring glittering on every social post, bridal shower hashtags trending among trust fund circles. The next, she was a headline. Bradley Archer under federal investigation, Ponzi scheme tied to international fraud. Photos of them hand in hand at charity balls were suddenly side by sides on tabloid blogs. Her face blurred under captions like "Fashion's Fallen Princess" and "How much did she know?" She called again, 2 days after moving in. I heard her through the bedroom door, sobbing into the receiver, begging someone, her PR agent, I guessed, not to release a statement. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I didn't know." The calls slowed, the texts stopped, her influencer contracts evaporated, friends she once toasted rooftop cocktails with began ghosting her, her name was no longer useful. And in the circles we came from, usefulness was the currency of connection. Our parents, silent. I waited a week before confronting them. "Are you even going to acknowledge what she's going through?" I asked my mother on the phone. "She's an adult," she said crisply, and she made her choices. "So did you," I said. "You chose to show up for Amanda when she was being crowned, but now that she's crumbling, she's inconvenient." "We're protecting our reputation," she replied. I laughed, bitter. "From your own daughter?" There was a long pause before she hung up. Amanda stayed in the guest room. She didn't ask for much. She slept a lot, cried more, left her food untouched most nights. It was like watching someone dissolve in real time. The girl who once planned $50,000 bridal showers now sat on my couch in oversized sweatshirts, clutching mugs she didn't drink from. One night, I found her sitting in the dark kitchen, scrolling through old photos on her phone. "Remember this?" she asked, showing me a picture from a trip to the lake house when we were kids. We were on a dock, arms slung around each other, both sunburned, both smiling. "You had braces," I teased. She smiled faintly. "You let me copy your book report that summer. I got an A." "I remember." Her eyes welled. "I was awful to you." I didn't say anything. "I thought if I aligned with them, I'd be protected, loved. But they only love you when you're shiny." I exhaled slowly. "That's the trap." Amanda looked at me. "I'm sorry, Rachel, for all of it. I didn't see you back then. I just didn't know how to not compete." My throat tightened. She added, "Now I'm nobody to them, and you're the one with a real life, a real marriage, real love." I reached out, placing my hand over hers. "You're not nobody. You're just at the part of your story where the ashes settle." She looked down. "Do they ever clear?" I nodded. "If you let them." In the days that followed, she began helping around the apartment. Dishes, laundry, answering emails. Little things. Her hands trembled less. Her voice steadied. Once she even laughed, genuinely, at something Thomas said over dinner. It startled all three of us. That's when I realized she wasn't just staying with us. She was healing. And for the first time in our lives, we were sisters, not competitors, not roles in our parents' scripted fantasy, just two women learning how to rebuild from the rubble. Amanda gradually became part of our daily life, though never as the center of it. She moved gently through the rhythms Thomas and I had built, waking early with us, helping chop vegetables for dinner, folding laundry even when no one asked. Her presence no longer felt invasive, it felt humbled. Real. One night we were curled up on the couch watching an old rom-com. Thomas had fallen asleep beside me, arms slung lazily over my shoulder. I reached over to adjust the blanket and caught Amanda watching us with a strange expression. Tender, wistful. "You two are solid," she said softly. I smiled. "We try." "No," she insisted. "It's more than that. You talk, you laugh, you're comfortable in silence. He doesn't try to dominate a room. You don't perform around him." I turned to her, surprised by the observation. She shrugged. "I don't think I've ever seen a relationship like that," she added. "Didn't you and Bradley—" She snorted. "Bradley treated me like an accessory." I let him because I thought that's what love looked like. Compliments in public, pressure in private. "I didn't realize you could just exist with someone, and it would be enough." Her voice cracked on the last word. We sat in silence for a moment, the flicker of the TV casting shadows on our faces. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I used to be jealous of you." I blinked. "What?" Amanda didn't look at me. "Not for your grades or your scholarships. I mean, I knew you were smarter. Everyone did. But I told myself that didn't matter. What mattered was being seen, and I was always seen." She paused. "But I wasn't known. Not really. People loved the idea of me. But you had friends who really knew you. You had depth. I could fake charisma, but you had connection. That scared me." I felt my throat tighten. For years I'd carried the pain of being unseen. But I had never imagined that behind Amanda's glow was a fear of being hollow. "I was popular," she said, "but you were real." A long silence fell between us, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. I reached out and took her hand. "You could still be." She looked at me, eyes wide. "It's not too late, Amanda." Her chin quivered. "I don't even know who I am without them." "I didn't either," I said, "until I left." We talked late into the night, about childhood, about our parents, about the way love was offered in conditional packages, perform well, dress right, date the approved man, the way neither of us ever really measured up unless we were useful. "I always thought I had to be the star," Amanda said, "because if I wasn't shining, I was disposable." I nodded. "And I thought if I just worked hard enough, I'd earn their approval. Turns out it's not a currency they trade in." "Then what do we do?" I squeezed her hand. "We write new terms." That week, Amanda started journaling. She applied for a part-time role at a non-profit that helped women re-enter the workforce. She said it felt weird to not lead with designer labels. I told her that was a good thing. One evening, while cooking dinner, she turned to Thomas and said, "Thanks for not treating me like a PR crisis." He smiled. "You're a person. That's all I ever see." I realized then that healing isn't loud. It doesn't come with an apology banner or a final act of redemption. It's slow, cumulative, built moment by moment like stitches in a torn fabric. Amanda and I weren't the same as before, but maybe that was the point. We were becoming something new, something forged in the fire, not burned by it. Sisters, survivors, and now, maybe, allies. The pregnancy test turned positive on a Tuesday morning. I'd bought it on a whim, mostly to rule out a possibility I wasn't quite ready to name. But there it was, 2 bold pink lines staring up at me from the bathroom counter, unblinking. Certain. I sat on the closed toilet lid, hand on my belly that didn't look any different yet, and whispered to myself, "It's real." When I told Thomas that night, he blinked twice, then wrapped me in his arms and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "We're having a baby," he whispered into my hair. "We're going to be someone's parents." I cried then, not because I was scared, though I was, but because for the first time in my life, the word family didn't come with weight, it came with light. A week later, our doorbell rang. Thomas was at work, Amanda was out volunteering. I opened the door and froze. My parents stood on the stoop, hands empty, expressions unfamiliar. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature, but in energy. Her usual crispness, the tailored posture, the bright, brittle smile, was gone. My father's suit was still expensive, but rumpled. He didn't speak right away. "We heard," my mother said finally, her voice quiet. "About the baby." I nodded slowly. "How?" "Amanda told us. She said you weren't going to." "I wasn't." She winced. "We're not here with offers," my father said. "No contracts, no investments, just ourselves." I didn't move. "Why now?" My mother swallowed. "Because for the first time in a long time we realized we've missed everything that matters." I narrowed my eyes. "And what is that exactly?" "You," she said, voice trembling. "Your wedding, your life, your joy." My father stepped forward. "We don't want to miss being part of something that's actually real." The words hung in the air like a suspended breath. For a moment I didn't respond. I watched them, really watched them. Not as parents, not as people I'd once chased approval from, but as two flawed humans who might finally be beginning to understand what they lost. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said. "I don't even know if I want to." My mother nodded slowly. "That's fair." "But this child," I continued, hand resting unconsciously on my abdomen, "deserves a clean slate." "We're not asking for anything," my father said. "We're just hoping for a start." A silence fell. Then I stepped aside. They walked in. We didn't talk about the past that day. We didn't talk about Amanda or Bradley or hydronic. We talked about names, due dates, the strange things pregnancy does to your sense of smell. My mother offered to send me some herbal tea that helped her with nausea when she was pregnant with Amanda. I said, "Okay." It wasn't healing, but it was something. When Thomas came home, he didn't ask questions. He saw them in the kitchen and simply greeted them with a polite nod. My father extended his hand. "I owe you an apology," he said, "and I know words won't be enough." "They never are," Thomas replied, "but they're a place to begin." My mother asked if she could feel the baby when the time came. "I'll let you know," I said. That night, after they left, I sat with Thomas on the couch, the room dim around us. "Did I do the right thing?" I asked. "There's no right," he said. "Only what feels true." "It doesn't feel complete," I admitted. He kissed my forehead. "It's not supposed to. Not yet." And I realized forgiveness doesn't always arrive as a grand gesture. Sometimes it comes as a door cracked open, not wide, but enough for light to slip in. 2 months before our due date, Thomas walked into the kitchen holding a white envelope. No logo, no stamp, just our names printed in precise black type. He looked like someone trying not to smile. "What's this?" I asked. He handed it to me without a word. I opened it slowly, unfolding the thick cardstock. Inside was a formal letter from the Department of Energy, co-signed by the Department of Defense. Hydronic Systems had been selected as the primary strategic partner for national water sustainability infrastructure over the next 10 years. I reread the letter 3 times, my fingers trembling slightly. "Thomas, they're scaling the grid," he said, voice low. "All 50 states, federal funding, deployment begins next quarter." I blinked at him, stunned. This changes everything." He nodded. "And there's one more thing." He reached for a tablet and brought up a list of names, corporate developers across the country. Some had green check marks beside them. Others were flagged. "Bennett Property Group," I read aloud. No check mark. "They're not compliant," Thomas said. "Not with transparency or sustainability benchmarks. If they don't meet Hydronic's base-level integration requirements within 6 months, they're cut from access to the national water grid." I set the tablet down. "They'll be shut out." "They'll lose investor confidence," he said, "and projects will stall or die." I leaned back, a mix of emotions washing over me. Vindication, dread, protectiveness, clarity. "They'll come," I whispered. "They already have," Thomas replied. "They sent a new proposal yesterday, not to me, to you." He handed me another envelope. This one marked Rachel Bennett Kane, Director of Strategy Partnerships. I didn't open it. "They're trying a new angle," I said. "If they can't reach you, they'll try through me." Thomas met my eyes. "What do you want to do?" I stared at the envelope, then looked toward the nursery, where paint samples still lined the wall. My hand went to my stomach. The baby kicked, small, certain. "I want to give them one last chance," I said. So we invited them to the house, again. This time there were no gifts, no fake pleasantries. My parents came in quiet, subdued, with Amanda beside them. We sat around the table. I laid the unopened envelope between us. "You know why we called you here," I said. My father nodded. "We want to fix this." I shook my head. "You want to save it. That's not the same." My mother looked down. "What do you want from us?" I took a breath. "I want you to start over." They looked up, startled. "Not with a contract, with yourselves, your company, your values." My father frowned. "That's not so simple, Rachel." "It's not supposed to be," I said, "but that's the only path forward." I slid the envelope back toward them. "You can choose to keep playing the old game, status, shortcuts, image, but you'll be left behind. Or you can join something real, something lasting, but it starts at the bottom, with truth." Amanda reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "They're listening," she whispered. I looked at our parents. For the first time, they weren't posturing, they weren't pivoting, they were just still. After a long silence, my father said, "We don't know how to do that." "Then learn," I replied. They nodded. We didn't sign anything that day, but a seed was planted. 3 weeks later, Bennett Property Group announced a full corporate restructure, sustainability first, transparency reports, ethical sourcing. Hydronic's name appeared on their next press release, not as a saviour, but as a partner. And me? I wasn't just their daughter anymore, I was their standard. When our baby was born, a little girl with Thomas's eyes and my stubborn chin, we named her Elia. It means light. On her first warm spring day, we wrapped her in a soft blanket and walked down to the river. The same trail where Thomas and I had wandered on our third date. The same bench where he first told me about his dreams. As we sat there, Elia dozing on my chest, Thomas reached over and laced his fingers through mine. "We built our home," he said softly, "not where we were born, but where we were finally seen." I leaned into him, heart full. "Yes," I whispered, "exactly that.